Hello and welcome to Return to Regalia, an Underland Chronicles reread podcast. I'm Una.
And I'm Nate.
And we are back for the Marks of Secret.
Oh yeah. If you thought shit was getting real before, you're in for a treat.
Yeah, it just keeps ramping up the intensity. It's so good to be back.
Yes.
It's summer. It's Pride Month.
Oh yeah. Happy Pride Month, everybody.
Happy Pride Month. I'm so fucking hyped for this book. It's my favorite in the series, which makes it one of my top favorite books of all time.
Nice.
You know, I think I have a thing for the penultimate books in series.
Because you like Battle of the Labyrinth too, right?
I do, and that is the fourth book in the Percy Jackson series. But I also, my favorite book in the Raven Cycle series is Blue Lily Lily Blue,
nice.
Which is the third book in a 4-book series.
Right, well, I mean, the fourth book in that series is like a disappointment.
That's true, yeah.
Apologies to all
Raven King
fans.
So yeah, I really love penultimate books in series. I think it's because it's like things are so intense, but we're not to the ending yet.
Yeah, and you don't really have the resolution that all the other books get. It's mostly just tension all the way through and then a cliffhanger at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like all three of the books I just mentioned because they have my favorite scenes in the whole series.
Uh-huh.
Like, it's not necessarily that I think the quality is best. Like, I could argue that Code of Claw is better written than this one, but, like, who's to say? They're all incredible. But this book just has so many iconic scenes. Like, every single scene in this book is so good.
Yeah, as I was rereading it, I was like, oh, yeah, I remember this.
Mm-hmm. So today we're going to be covering chapters 1 and 2, in which Gregor meets Ripred and Pearlpelt beneath the palace. Yeah, what did you think of these 2 chapters?
Yeah, they were... I feel like I forgot most of this book until I read these chapters. Like, I really remember from the 5th book, like, I'm really looking forward to Lizzie and Ripred meeting.
Yeah.
I kind of like, I was like, okay, this is before they meet, so that hasn't happened yet. But then when I'm reading this, I'm like, oh, wow, oh, hang on, there was all this stuff happening. Like, first of all, just Mrs. Cormacy knowing what's going on is great and adds such a good flavor.
I agree.
Yeah, and then just seeing what has become of the Bane is I was thinking thoughts about this as I was reading.
I can't wait to discuss Mrs. Cormacy and Lizzie and Ripred and the Bane with you today.
Yay.
Should we just dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
The book opens with Gregor sitting in bed looking at the silvery scars that cover his body. There are thin, crisscrossing ones from the evil jungle vines and deeper ones from the cutters. They make it so he can't wear short sleeves even though it's over 90 degrees out. So it's actually July right now, and later we learn that Lizzie is about to leave for summer camp. So it's actually been exactly a year since the first book began.
Yeah, he mentions, like, later in this book, he talks about, like, how he first went to the Underland a couple of months ago or something. And I'm like, hang on. Like, a year is a long time, but also it's only been a year of all this shit happening. Like, this has been 1 year for Gregor.
Yeah. It's especially weird coming from, like, a Percy Jackson standpoint where each book is a year, except for Titan's Curse happens in the winter. But there's so much time between, like, action.
Yeah. I feel like that's the standard for a lot of, like, middle grade books. Because it'll be, like, the school year.
Yes. Harry Potter is the same way. Yeah. And the characters get a lot of downtime between adventures. And Gregor just, like, it has to keep constantly going back.
Right. Like, I feel like I was mentally like, yeah, Gregor gets a couple months off between each book. But no, he doesn't. Mm-mm. It's just one thing after the other.
Yeah, and at this point, he's taking regular trips to the Underland because he's been visiting his mom this entire time.
So fucked up that his mom has to stay down there.
Yeah. When Mrs. Cormacy first saw Gregor in shorts at the beginning of the summer, she pointed out that people would ask about his scars. The narration says, there were a zillion things his family couldn't afford, but questions topped the list. I always really liked that line.
Yeah, that's a good line.
Like, using the verb afford in, like, 2 senses of the word.
Yeah. Is that called a zwegma? A zwegma?
I don't
Hang
know
on.
what that word means.
I saw a Tumblr post about this. It was saying that that's like the name of a sentence where like the example they gave was our teeth and ambitions are bared from the Lion King, where it's like
Oh.
it changes, like it uses the same word in two different ways or something. But now I'm worried that somebody on Tumblr just made that up. So I'm gonna. Or are you gonna Google
Yeah,
it?
here, because that sounds like a poetic device that is really useful.
Yes. Oh yeah. Hang on, guys. We're getting you some useful poetic devices to take home today.
Zeugma, a figure of speech in which a word applies to two others in different senses.
Okay. So so yeah, well I guess affords applies to thing and questions, and thing is implied to be like a physical thing, whereas questions is a like questions isn't like a thing you can buy.
Right. Yeah, they mean afford as in like they can't afford to have people like looking into their family.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it quite counts. It's pronounced
I think it does though.
excellent. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
'Cause
Tumblr.
the examples here are John and his license expired last week. So like a license expires, but then like if a person expires, that means they died.
Yeah.
So the verb expired has two different,
Okay. Yeah, that's the
Like,
same thing.
yeah, two different like semantic meanings. Yeah, so I think that counts.
Cool.
I've never heard that word before. That's awesome.
Yeah, shout out to that one random person on Tumblr who I'll try to find that after we record this so we can credit them.
Gregor puts on some ointment from the Underland that's supposed to help his scars fade and misses the basketball court and swimming pool. But he finds comfort in knowing that he can escape to the Underland. He used to dread the Underland so much, but now it's his escape. And I think that that's such an interesting shift that has happened.
Yeah, but also the fact that it has become his escape because it made him like unable to participate in the outside world in the same way.
Yes. Yeah, like the Underland has made it so that he doesn't belong in the Overland anymore. So Gregor needs the Underland
Yeah.
because in a way he belongs to the Underland now.
I feel like there's another word for that, but like a psychological thing.
Yeah.
Like you get like it's like PTSD, like you adapt to your traumatic circumstance in a way that's beneficial to you when you're in that circumstance, and then once you get out, those same skills are now harmful to you.
Yeah.
But he hasn't really adapted because he's been scarred by the Underland, so that's not exactly what I'm thinking of.
To me it is reminiscent of like an abusive relationship.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Where the person keeps coming back to their abuser because of the positive things that the abuser offers, but they wouldn't need that like comfort from the abuser if they weren't like a subject of abuse.
You're so right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I worded that right, but like
but no, I get what you're saying, that like he goes to the Underland because he needs to take refuge from things that happened to him in the Underland.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the Underland has made him dependent on the Underland.
Yeah.
So like it's like tricked him into thinking that the Underland is an escape.
Oh wait, I know. Or smoking cigarettes. When I read this random thing recently, I can't remember where I read this. Maybe it's not true, but like smoking cigarettes is supposed to like relax you, but it turns out that like the more you smoke cigarettes, you actually get like less relaxed. So people will start smoking cigarettes for that feeling of relief, but then eventually they're smoking cigarettes just to get any feeling of relief, and they're actually less relieved than they were before they started smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. Gregor thinks about how even though his apartment is crowded, his mother's absence is always felt. The narration points out specific details that illustrate her absence, like an empty chair at the table and an unused toothbrush in the holder. And this makes me think of something that an English professor quoted in a lecture once. Ooh. That, like, I heard it and I never forgot it. The quote is, "You don't write a poem about war, you write about the first time you step into your brother's empty bedroom."
Nice.
And that's by the slam poet / hip-hop artist Kyle Tran Meyer, aka Guante.
Ooh, never heard of him.
I also hadn't, but I really love this quote, and it's similar to a quote by Richard Price, which says, "You don't write about the horrors of war, you write about a kid's burnt socks lying in the road."
Yeah.
So the idea behind both of these quotes is that, like, it's hard to write about big abstract concepts like war, and it's much more effective to write about something small that is a result of the bigger thing, which, first of all, is just great writing advice.
Yes, pro tip.
Because I have definitely felt this in my life as a poet, like trying to write about like big world things that are frustrating me,
right,
and the people around me. But like it's useless to try and put that kind of stuff into words. But you can look around at like what is happening to you personally or your friends and describe like what it's doing to them. And then it gets at like the larger issues.
Mm-hmm.
Like when our college was like sending us home because of COVID.
Oh yeah.
Like I wrote a poem about how you could like walk through the hallways and everyone was like on their phones frantically trying to like arrange travel plans, and like how everyone was like blowing all of their like clubs budgets because they wouldn't be able to spend them after this week or whatever.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so I think that was kind of me being like, I can't write about the pandemic, that's too big, but I am going to write about what I see in my college hallways. Yeah, so I'm thinking about that here because Suzanne Collins is really good at writing about war because she makes you feel the effects of war with details like Gregor's mom's toothbrush.
Yes. That's such a good summary of what she does.
Yeah. Gregor knows his mom is better off in the Underland because they have doctors and everyone there treats her like a queen, but Regalia is pretty much always on the brink of war, so it's not ideal. He goes to the bathroom and uses scouring powder to get the fishy-smelling ointment off his hands. And I didn't realize this as a kid, but scouring powder literally means, like, the stuff that you use to scrub, like, bathtubs and shit.
Yeah, I was like, why is he putting this on his hands? That's not good, dude.
Yeah, like, just...
Yeah, why is he using scouring powder? That's not good, dude.
That seems really abrasive and not good for his skin.
Yeah, just let your hands smell a little fishy, man. It's fine.
Yeah, but I get it, though. I hate having, like, lotion feeling on my hands.
Oh, same, yeah. He's got to go to the Underland and be like, hey, what do you guys use after you use the fish ointment?
Yeah, yeah. Maybe they're all just walking around with fish hands.
Not good.
In the kitchen, Mrs. Cormacy is making breakfast for everyone. Boots is enjoying a powdered donut, but Lizzie is too nervous to eat because she's supposed to leave for summer camp today. Gregor's dad enters, and Gregor watches his hands to see if they're shaking, which is always a hint that it'll be a bad day for him, but he seems okay right now. When Dad tells Lizzie she needs to eat more, she expresses that she doesn't think she should go to camp. She says, "What if something happens here and you need me, or Mom gets sicker, or what if I come back and everybody's gone?" And under normal circumstances, those would be, like, totally irrational things to worry about.
Right.
But for this family, it's not even far-fetched.
Right. I'm like, she's so right. Like, maybe she will come back and everyone will be gone. Like,
there's a world in which that could happen. Dad tries to calm Lizzie down by saying Mom is getting better every day. Gregor tries to help by saying that Mom wants Lizzie to go to camp, but Dad gives him a look when he starts to point out that Lizzie won't even be able to visit Mom. Apparently, Lizzie's tried to go to the Underland many times, but she always gets a panic attack before making it through the laundry room grate. So she hasn't actually been able to visit Mom in the Underland yet.
Which is so rough.
Yeah. Gregor tries to apologize, but Lizzie looks devastated. Mrs. Cormacy says that Lizzie's the only one here with any sense, and she'd never go to the Underland herself. We get the story of what happened directly after the end of Book 3, when Gregor told Mrs. Cormacy about the Underland. Apparently all Mrs. Cormacy said in response was, "Well, that takes the cake." She double-checked the story with Gregor's dad, but she believed it easily because it explained a lot about their family. Like, she knew something was up all this time, and getting the explanation, even though it's, like, fucking wild, it's, like, a relief to her that it's like, oh, now I know what's going on.
Right. And I feel like part of her's like, oh, that's not that bad.
Right, exactly. Could be worse. There's a funny bit about how Gregor took Mrs. Cormacy down to the laundry room to meet an Underland bat, and she made small talk with them and politely brushed a dryer lint off their fur, but afterwards she had to sit in the stairwell to process everything.
That's so funny.
I was wondering, like, what bat do you think that was?
Oh, I feel like Nike's pretty I don't think Aries Like, Ares could be called into action, but I feel like he wouldn't be the best bat to meet.
Especially if it was, like, right after book 3, Ares would still be too sick.
Oh, right.
I think it must be Nike.
Yeah.
Or, like, maybe, no, Aurora. Nike and Aurora were both still injured at the end of book 3.
I wonder if it was just a random bat, and that's why. It was just like,
Yeah.
hey, can anybody come up and confirm with my nosy neighbor who's helping us out?
Yeah. So now Mrs. Cormacy helps take care of Gregor's family. She offers to wrap Lizzie's donut for the road, but Lizzie wants Gregor to give it to Rip Red, which he doesn't like doing, but it does put Rip Red in a better mood. Mrs. Cormacy points out that out of all the creatures in the Underland, Rip Red probably needs her help the least. I love how she calls Rip Red a smart alecky rat, because that means Gregor's told her exactly what Rip Red is like.
Oh my god, that's so true. They haven't even met.
I just think it's funny to imagine Gregor relaying Rip Red's sick burns to Mrs. Cormacy.
I feel like Mrs. Cormacy is the person who would be best for him to, like, truly commiserate with. Like, he wants to keep his parents, like, calm. Lizzie, he can't freak out. But Mrs. Cormacy, he can be like, you would not believe the bullshit I've had to put up with from this fucking rat.
You're right, actually. I bet Gregor does, like, tell her more than he tells everyone else.
And Mrs. Cormacy loves it. She eats it up. Like,
Yeah, you're probably right. Lizzie says she thinks Rip Red is lonely, and Gregor thinks, leave it to Lizzie to turn that irascible, lethal grouch Rip Red into someone to feel sorry for. Which kind of hints at, like, Lizzie and Rip Red's future friendship.
Yes.
I love it so much. Lizzie leaves to brush her teeth, and everyone expresses worry about her, but she ends up leaving for camp 15 minutes later. Gregor, Dad, and Mrs. Cormacy discuss what they call the family business. Saving people, hunting things. Basically, they're taking things from Regalia's museum and selling them in the Overland. Gregor doesn't really like doing this because he knows their owners probably met tragic ends, but the income does help his family. But today he's only going to the Underland to visit his mom and friends and have an echolocation lesson with Rip Red. I love that they're just, like, developing a way to make money off the Underland.
Yeah, because it's their full-time job right now.
Yeah,
like,
it's the only way that the money is coming in. Even Mrs. Cormacy is retired. Like, no one's working.
Oh my god, yeah, she gets her Social Security check and she's like, well, we need 500,000 things, so.
Yeah, it's cool that they have this, like, kind of deal going with the
Yeah.
Underland, that they can just take whatever they want from the museum.
I wonder if there's anybody in the Underland who's, like, really mad that they're taking stuff out of the museum.
That's what I was thinking about. Like, is the fucking museum curator like, no, that's my exhibit. You can't take that.
Literally, like, imagine if somebody just, like, came into the MoMA and was like, yo, we need to sell some of these paintings.
Yeah, I can do it because I'm the warrior.
Yeah.
And also my mom is sick and she's the only one who can work. Yeah, I bet someone's probably pissed about it, though.
Yeah.
Before Mrs. Cormacy walks Gregor and Boots down to the laundry room, they stop by her apartment to get some leftover macaroni salad. She tells Gregor he might as well take it to Rip Red before she throws it out because, quote, the mayonnaise is starting to turn bad. But she does find a paper bag to put it in because she doesn't want that rat licking her bowl. It's like a top 10 Cormacy line to me.
Yeah, you're so right.
So she's basically a hypocrite for telling Lizzie not to feed Rip Red because she's doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, and it's so funny that Lizzie's like, he might be hungry, and Mrs. Cormacy, like she is with everything, is like, well, it was trash I was getting rid of anyway.
Yeah. I love that. She says, that rat, what's he got? No real home, no family. He has to fight all the time. You know, everybody needs a little joy in their life. For goodness sake, take him the macaroni salad.
Top 10 Miss Cormacy monologues.
Yeah, literally. I wish I could do the accent that Paul Bamer gives her in the audiobook.
For God's sake, take him the macaroni salad.
That's really close, actually.
Thank you.
For goodness sake, take him the macaroni salad.
I could do it if I practiced, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty close, though. It's like a
New York accent.
It's like a heavy New York, like, old grandma.
Yeah.
Gregor knows it's silly for him to be so resistant about taking food to Rip Red, but he doesn't want to reward Rip Red for being so mean to him during echolocation lessons. At the laundry room grate, Nike appears, and she and Boots say, greetings, princess, to each other, except Boots says, princess? It's such a cute little moment.
Yeah, and I love, and Gregor's like, it's still funny.
Yeah, that's still a good one, Boots.
Because they do it every time.
Yeah. I talk a bit about this later because there's a moment with Gregor and Rip Red too, but like I love how Boots and Nike have this moment and it's explained that like this is like their thing that they do and this is like something that they have been doing and this is like a thing that they developed with each other between books that we didn't get to see. And it's like establishing how familiar Nike is with Gregor and Boots.
That's so true, especially because they basically just met her in the last book.
Yeah, and now like Boots and her have this like funny little joke together.
That is such a good way of saying how often Gregor's been going to the Underland.
Yeah, exactly. Gregor says bye to Mrs. Cormacy, who says she'll, quote, keep an eye on things while he's gone. He feels bad about arguing with her about the macaroni salad because she's helping his family a lot right now. He thanks her, but she just dismisses this and tells him to get going. Nike, Gregor, and Boots land in the high hall, and Gregor runs to meet Rip Red. Deep in the palace, he unbars a heavy stone door and goes down some stairs to the secret passage where he has his echolocation lessons. Apparently, the Regalian Council was reluctant to let Gregor and Rip Red meet under the palace. I want to know who convinced them.
Yeah, that's so true.
What was that argument like?
And the fact that it's so dangerous that they already need to meet under the palace as opposed to like...
Right, because they don't want to alarm the citizens by having Rip Red like out in the open.
Oh, right. So it doesn't just need to be like in regalia, it needs to be in secret.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that must have been, Vicus must have been diplomating for his life there.
I was thinking, Vicus probably was the one who was like, the warrior needs to learn this.
I mean, and Sullivan's like making deals in the background. Like,
yeah, I was thinking Sullivan might have had something to do with it too, because she specifically wants Gregor to be like a soldier.
Right.
So it would make sense for her to want him to train with Rip Red. Yeah. I just want to imagine like Rip Red going to the council and being like, this boy needs to learn echolocation.
You have no idea how bad he sucks at echolocation.
He needs my help so bad, you guys. So in the secret passageway, Rip Red is lounging against a wall, gnawing on a bone, which is just like the most typical Rip Red behavior.
Yeah.
Like if Rip Red was a video game character, his idle animation would be like lounging and gnawing on a bone.
Oh my god.
Or if he was like an NPC, like that would be his default state until you come up and talk to him. Rip Red snaps at Gregor to get the flashlight out of his eyes, and he says, how many times do I have to tell you? Which is what I was saying, like, I think this is a great little way to establish how familiar they are with each other at this point. Like, I'm always really interested in how authors naturally show established relationships. Like, Maggie Stiefvater actually does this really well in the Raven Cycle, too, because the friends in those books get closer between books too, and to illustrate that, they have like little inside jokes and like arguments that they express, like, oh, not this again or whatever, and that's such a convenient way to say like these characters have been interacting even though you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And you get a feel for what their friendship has been like while you weren't looking.
Yeah, and that really, like, I feel like I almost don't notice it when I'm reading, but it adds so much, like, texture. Like, it feels real, everything between these people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this is a good example, like, hinting at the argument that Rip Red and Gregor have had before about this flashlight thing.
Right.
So much so that Gregor doesn't even, like, respond to Rip Red yelling at him about this. He just, like, moves the flashlight away. Rip Red asks what the smell is, and Gregor gives him Lizzie's donut. Rip Red says, why is it I never get to spend time with the nice members of your family? I'm assuming that he also means Gregor's dad?
I was thinking grandma, because that's...
Oh, that's a good one, actually. Yeah, Gregor must have told him about grandma at some point. But Rip Red does, like, I think Gregor's dad would be more likely because Rip Red has met Gregor's dad
That's true.
a couple times, like, in passing.
That's true. I was thinking meet instead of spend time with, but you're right. He has met Gregor's dad.
Yeah, like, spend time with, because I think that they probably would have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. They're both gonna be prisoners of the rats. That's gonna be a thing they have in common.
Yeah. They're both deep thinkers.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, it doesn't really say if Gregor's dad has been back down to the Underland recently.
Ooh, I assume not, but I feel like he would have wanted to visit Gregor's mom.
That's the exact same thought I had, is that I always assumed he hadn't been back down. And I guess I assumed, like Lizzie, he just, like, has, you know, so much trauma associated with the Underland that he can't bring himself to go back down.
I was also thinking maybe it's like when my mom and dad fly somewhere, she makes them get different plane tickets so that if one plane crashes, we'll have one parent. Maybe, you know, normal things. Maybe Gregor's parents are like one of us in the Underland at a time in case something happens.
That makes sense. Yeah, that Gregor's dad just has to be, like, the Overland parent for now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan for them. He also could have just been like, I've had enough Underland for one lifetime, thanks.
Yeah.
Gregor says that Mrs. Cormacy sent Rip Red food too, and he sighs, "Ah, la bella Cormacy, and what does the enchantress of the kitchen send me today?"
I'm so glad you said that, because otherwise I was going to be like, hey, Rip Red Cormacy shippers, just so you know, he did say this.
Yeah, no, literally, like, this is so funny to me that Rip Red has, like, admiration and love for Mrs. Cormacy, even though they've never met.
Literally.
That they have this, like, parasocial relationship through sending food through Gregor.
He's literally like their courier. He's like the Cyrano of their...
I just also love, like, La Bella Cormacy. Like, I guess I'm assuming that Cormacy's Italian, and then Rip Red is calling her beautiful in Italian.
Oh yeah, how does Rip Red know Italian?
That's the question!
How does he know that the name Cormacy is an Italian name?
Yeah, wait.
Is he just in the library, giant rat in the library, just doing his thing? Because that's why he knows so much other stuff, right?
Yeah, because he's read books in the Overland.
I wonder if he knew that before, or if he met Mrs. Cormacy and was like, or if he like heard of Mrs. Cormacy who was giving him all this food and was like, I must learn more about this astonishing woman.
I'm gonna look for books about people named Cormacy.
Right.
I don't know.
And then I'm gonna look for books about people named Cormacy, and once I find out more, I'm gonna find out, you know, just some complimentary things to say to them, just on the off chance that we ever meet.
On the off chance that Gregor will relay what I said about Mrs. Cormacy to Mrs. Cormacy.
Yeah. Mrs. Cormacy's like, did he say anything about the food? And Gregor's like, he called you La Bella Cormacy. Can we talk about something else?
He called you an enchantress of the kitchen. Like, that's so sexy. Like, enchantress? Like, that is such a...
That's sultry. That's sultry.
Yeah. Just the word enchantress, like, fucking gets to me. Anyway, before Gregor can hand over the bag of macaroni salad, he hears a scuffling sound down the tunnel. Rip Red scolds whoever it is for not staying put, and they say, I smelled food. But when they say it, their voice squeaks, and Gregor compares it to his cousin Rodney, whose voice cracked a lot as a teenager. Rip Red reveals the newcomer is the Bane, and he's only here because he maimed his last two babysitters. Rip Red invites him to come in and thank the warrior for saving his life. The chapter ends with Gregor aiming his flashlight down the tunnel and finding an 8-foot mountain of white fur. Intense.
Yeah.
Because the last time we saw the Bane, he was just a little baby.
Right.
And now he's gigantic. Bigger than Rip Red.
Right.
I
don't think Rip Red's 8 feet tall.
No, I think it says that Rip Red's like 6 feet.
Yeah.
And I think later it says that when they're fighting, the Bane is bigger.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Rip Red's like normal height for a giant rat.
Exactly. Chapter 2 starts with Gregor exclaiming, "Jeez!" which is such a classic Gregor exclamation.
Yeah.
Imagine if Gregor just said, like, Jesus! Like, Christ, Rip Red! Anyway. Rip Red says they're expecting the Bane to grow another 2 to 4 feet in the next 6 months, and Gregor compares it to snow piling up on a mountain. Which is cool because in the prophecy of Bane, it describes the Bane with his white coat as snow.
Oh, nice.
So Gregor's like using the same metaphor as the prophecy did.
That's kind of funny. Like he's subconsciously thinking back to the prophecy a little like, damn, they were right.
Yeah. Rip Red introduces Gregor to the rat and mentions that even though they call him the Bane, his mother gave him the name Pearl Pelt. Gregor tries to ask what Pearl Pelt likes to be called, but he just says it doesn't matter because everyone calls him Bane or the Bane, and Ripred makes fun of his real name and calls him Pearly Girly. Ripred argues that Pearl Pelt is difficult to say and mispronounces it a few times, but Pearl Pelt knows Ripred just wants to humiliate him.
Wait, total digression here. We don't have to go super into this, but does Pearly Girly as an insult mean that there's rat misogyny in the Underland?
I was wondering about that a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Like, not that specifically, but I was thinking about how him being girly is, like, an insult.
Right.
And, like, the word pearl is worth making fun of because it's, like, a feminine thing.
Right.
Like, we're ascribing femininity to the word pearl.
Yeah, because it is like a women's name in our world. I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the use of the word girly is, like, interesting to me.
Yeah. It's like, I wonder if that's something that was originally in the Underland or something that they picked up from the humans over the years.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Who definitely came with their, like, 14th century.
It would be 15th century.
Okay, with their...
17th century.
Oh, no, 17th. Okay, yeah. Anyway, they brought their 17th century gender bullshit with them, I would only assume.
Yeah. And even if they didn't, like, Ripred is reading Overland stuff.
Oh, so. No. Ripred, you gotta read some feminist literature.
Yeah, and it's 2003 in these books, so...
Oh, no.
What a time. Gregor thinks Pearl Pelt is right because he's been on the receiving end of Ripred's bullying himself. Gregor tells Pearl Pelt to ignore Ripred, but he says it's easier for Gregor because he's a rager. Pearl Pelt says that once he's fully grown, he'll be king, which makes Gregor nervous, because the whole reason that he was originally sent to kill the Bane was to keep him from rising to power. Ripred continues to be condescending toward Pearl Pelt and asks if someone called Twirl Tongue has been putting ideas in his head. Pearl Pelt argues that his other friends agree, and Ripred says, "Your friends. Anyone can be your friend if they give you a few fish. And they whisper their little words in your ears, how you're so strong and so brave, how one day you'll be king, and you greedily gulp down the fish and the lies, you big white fool. You have no idea who your real enemies are." Which is just, like, biting and sinister and cynical.
Yeah, like, Ripred has had enough. I still am. I'm like, Ripred, you fucked up bad, dude. Like, why are you saying this stuff?
Yeah, to this day, when I read these books, I'm like, damn, Ripred, like, take it easy.
Yeah, like, there's still, like, we get more in this chapter, but Ripred really seems to think that we'll get into it more, but he thinks that Pearl Pelt is, like, already doomed.
Right. Yes, exactly. And we can definitely talk about that.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I actually wanted to talk about two motifs that come up in this quote. One is the food motif that we've brought up a few times now. The idea that people are winning over the Bane's favor with fish. And the Bane entered this conversation by being like, I smelled food, and he's hungry, and he's really big, he has to eat a lot. And in book 3, Ripred mentions, just like as a side note, that the Bane has trouble like hunting for himself. So I think that the idea of like Pearl Pelt's friends giving him fish and also like feeding him these lies goes hand in hand with this food motif of like the rats are starving, and like giving food is like giving power.
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
Because they're not just giving him food, they're giving him their food that they would have eaten.
Yes.
Partially because they know that he's destined to be the king.
Right.
And they can both help him get more powerful and curry his favor.
Exactly. The other motif is one that we're just starting to scratch the surface of, and that's the color symbolism. So the way that Ripred specifically mentions the Bane being white is very interesting to me. I don't have like a fully thought out thesis about this yet, but I do want to keep track of color theory going forward because these books are really good at subverting the typical dynamic of like white equals good and black equals bad. And we're going to get, like, way into that when Gregor gets his black armor in the last book.
Oh my god, yeah. How could I forget?
Pearl Pelt says that Ripred is his enemy because he's an ally to the humans, bats, and mice. He says, I should, and Ripred says, you should what? Kill me? You know you're always welcome to try, Pearly Girly. I love when a character does that, like, oh, you're threatening me? I dare you. Like, yeah. I dare you to act on what you're threatening to do.
Literally. Very hot, actually.
Yeah, super badass. So Pearl Pelt lunges at Rip Red, and Gregor is astonished because there aren't many rats who would do that. Gregor has to leap out of the way to avoid getting caught in the fight, but it's not actually much of a fight because Rip Red is beating Pearl Pelt easily. The Bane attacking Rip Red scares Gregor because, quote, he was either very brave or very stupid or just very deluded about his own power, and Gregor realizes that any of those traits could be very dangerous for the Bane to have. Rip Red orders Pearl Pelt to settle down and says, I'm getting bored, and when I'm bored, I'm dangerous. Which is so edgy of him.
How long did you spend thinking of that one, Rip Red?
Yeah, he's like, welcome to my twisted mind. Pearl Pelt tries to attack again, but Rip Red just slams him into a wall and says, you can't ever stop until you hurt yourself, which just implies that this has happened a lot.
Ooh, yeah.
And the Bane just keeps trying it. He just keeps fucking trying to attack Rip Red, knowing that it won't end well. He's like, maybe I'm big enough now to get him. Pearl Pelt starts to cry, and Rip Red predictably has no sympathy for him. Gregor tells Rip Red to give him a break, and Pearl Pelt cries that Rip Red made him leave his friends, and he's like Rip Red's prisoner. Rip Red says, is that what they tell you, those wonderful friends of yours? And did they also tell you I spared your life and raised you from a pup? Were you fed? Did you get the plague? Are you here now to complain about me? Which is just like classic abusive parent dialogue.
Literally.
Actually.
Literally.
Like this is a very common thing for parents to say to their kids.
Right.
Is like, I raised you, I fed you, I put a roof over your head, as if that isn't fucking required of a parent.
As if you didn't decide to do that when you had a kid.
Yeah.
Like, sure, Rip Red, like, could have said, no, I'm not gonna raise the Bane. But, like, he was the baby in that situation. Like,
yeah.
You would have been a piece of shit if you were like, no, I don't feel like raising this orphan that I've been given.
Right. And it's like, you can't be mean to someone and be like, well, I do all of this other good stuff for you, so I get to fucking yell at you and,
true.
like, physically attack you. Yeah, it's not good.
It's not good.
Pearl Pelt says that actually it was Razor who took care of him, not Rip Red, but Rip Red demands that Pearl Pelt tell Gregor what he did to Razor. Pearl Pelt starts to suck on the end of his tail, and Rip Red tells the story of how Pearl Pelt killed Razor over a crawler carcass. Apparently it was an accident. Pearl Pelt was hungry and he hit Razor, but he didn't know his own strength, and he ended up knocking Razor over the edge of a cliff. Which, at this point, is just a tragic story.
Yeah.
And we can definitely still sympathize with the Bane.
Yeah. Like, Rip Red seems to be implying that it was deliberate. I'm like, or you have a look on your face. Podcast readers, you can't see, but Una has a look right now.
What were you gonna say though?
I was gonna say, like, Rip Red is implying that it was on purpose. Like, he thinks that the Bane is like a bad person because he did this. But I'm like, dude, it was an accident. He was a kid. He was really hungry.
Yeah, so that's what we're thinking as readers at this point, and we're like, Rip Red, Jesus, lay off. Like, it was an accident. The Bane's really big. He doesn't know his own strength. Like, we get it. But then Rip Red says, you tried to eat his body to conceal the evidence. And then to Gregor, that's how we found him, soaked in Razor's blood, chewing on his liver.
Yeah, that is. I was like, yeah, little kids try to hide what they've done, but that is pretty far. That's pretty fucked up, actually.
Yeah. I think later in the book, Gregor thinks about how, like, well, I've seen a spider eat another spider down here. Like,
right.
Whatever, rats eat rats. That's not a big deal, I guess. But, like, it is. Like, I think that this is supposed to be a sign of, like, the Bane's total, like, he's totally unhinged. And just even from our perspective as humans, like, we're listening to the story and being like, oh no, the poor Bane doesn't know his own strength and he accidentally killed his parental figure who he cared about, and that sucks for him. And then we hear that he tried to cover up the accident by eating him, and it's like, oh god, oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
Like, that's like a whole nother level of like, oh, like, that's not okay.
Yeah, that's more deliberate than the first thing.
Yeah, like, the Bane made a choice to be like, I'm gonna eat him.
Right, so I don't get in trouble.
Which is fucked up. And you'd think that even if rats do typically eat other rats, and cannibalism is like not a huge thing in the Underland to certain species, you'd think that the Bane having an emotional connection to Razor
That's true.
would prevent him from eating him. Like there would be enough of a connection there to make it so the Bane couldn't do that to him.
Yeah, it would be like a Simba situation where he just goes and like cries next to the body.
Yeah. And the fact that the Bane is able to overlook the emotional connection and jump to a deranged action to take, like eating the body, like that's just like giving me like young, like future serial killer vibes.
That's fair. I'm still like, okay, he was upset. He didn't want to get in trouble. He was also hungry. But like, yeah, that is very troubling.
Yeah.
That would be, I think I do get the impression that Rip Red would not be as mad if it truly was just an accident. And then the Bane was like, oh no.
Yeah, I think Rip Red is like, no, you need to tell Gregor the full story.
Oh, that's true, because yeah, the Bane did choose not to share that part.
Right.
Because he knows it was a bad look for him.
Yes. But also it's clear that Pearl Pelt is really upset by this.
Right, that's true. Yeah, maybe he just didn't want to also say like, hey, yeah, and also I ate him. Like that was a pretty bad day for him, I would assume.
Yeah. And like you could say maybe he was so shocked and traumatized that he made this like very rash decision.
Right.
So I think that it's not supposed to be like a clear cut, like the Bane was wrong to do this, or like, yes, he was wrong to do this, but like, is he at fault for what happened entirely, or does he merit some sympathy?
Yeah, because there's a lot, I feel like, especially in this chapter, that makes, I'm like, are they saying that the Bane is like, not is Suzanne Collins, but like the narrative kind of goes back and forth between like, was the Bane doomed to always become this, or was this something that could have been prevented?
Yeah, exactly. I know, I think that is what Suzanne Collins is saying.
Yeah, I guess it was what was, because I was just going to say, I was like, the narrative seems to be saying that the Bane is doomed, but I'm like, no, that's not what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Rip Red is saying that the Bane is doomed.
Yes, Rip Red is thinking that, but Gregor he has mixed feelings. And I think that we are also supposed to not know what the moral truth is supposed to be.
I think I got too emotionally involved here. I was like, Rip Red, fuck you. The Bane did nothing wrong.
No, I think that this is supposed to kind of like throw a wrench in the reader's sympathy, because we're also like, we're used to seeing Rip Red bullying Gregor, like Gregor, we also know how Rip Red can be, and we can imagine how shitty it would be living with him as the Bane. And even just from like what little we've seen of them interacting here, we can kind of think like, oh, that would be a really terrible setup.
Yeah.
So we're immediately like, damn, Rip Red, you're so harsh all the time to Gregor, and now the Bane too. But then you hear this like shocking detail, this gruesome detail.
Right.
And we're like, oh, we should maybe it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Rip Red goes on to describe how Pearl Pelt maimed his aforementioned babysitters. He blinded Clausen in one eye and ripped off Ratriff's foreleg.
Which, that's pretty, I was like, that's his whole fucking arm.
Yeah. Like, that's major, especially for the rats who have to survive in the Deadland and shit.
Especially, I was just thinking, like, I thought it was like, oh, he just grabbed his arm and pulled it. But, like, in order for there to be enough resistance for him to, like, rip it off, he would have had to, like, deliberately, like, grab his whole body in one hand and grab his arm in the other.
Yeah, like what happened?
Yeah.
What led him to do that?
Yeah.
And it could have been some other weird freak accident.
Right. It could have been that, I forget what was the guy's name?
Ratriff.
Like Ratriff was actually doing something shitty.
Yeah.
But like,
but Ripper doesn't give us that context.
Right.
And the Bane is too upset to,
give
his side of the story. But we do, like, that's major damage. That's like the Bane has permanently disabled this rat who was supposed to be taking care of him. So it's no wonder that no one wants to be around the Bane anymore.
Right. I do think it's funny, or at least interesting, that after the Bane tried to eat the corpse of his former caretaker that he killed, there were still two other people who were like, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Before Rip Red, like, the nuclear option had to.
Right. Yeah, I wonder if they had sympathy for the Bane and they were like, it's okay, you didn't mean to.
Right.
We can forgive this.
Or if they were like, if the Bane likes me and values me, then I will be important when he's king.
Yeah. These are all great thoughts. Yeah, I would give almost anything to get a little bit of the Bane POV.
Yes.
Of living with Rip Red.
Suzanne Collins, stop working on that new Hunger Games novel.
For real.
We know what your real calling is. What really needs to happen.
We need the Hamnet prequel. We need the Solovette prequel. We need the Pearl Pelt POV of between books.
Yes, I don't know what the word is for that.
Yeah, a quell. Not a prequel or a sequel, a quell.
Yeah, a quarter quell because it comes before the fourth book.
So yeah, now Rip Red looks after Pearl Pelt because no one else can. He demands that Pearl Pelt stop sucking on his tail and makes fun of him for thinking anyone would follow him as a king. Pearl Pelt says, maybe they already do, and runs away.
It's not your dream. It's not my dream, Dad. It's yours.
Yeah, for real. It's not a phase. I will be king.
Oh my God.
As soon as he's out of earshot, Rip Red asks Gregor what he thinks of the Bane. The narration says, it took Gregor a while to answer. In a few minutes, he had experienced shock at seeing the Bane, discomfort at his kingly ambitions, fear at his boldness, pity at his obvious emotional instability, and revulsion at his murder of his caretaker. He's a mess, said Gregor finally. I just love that paragraph.
Yeah.
It just ends with Gregor being like, yeah, he's a mess. That's complicated. I can't unpack all that right now with you, Rip Red. Rip Red adds that he's a dangerous mess, and it's their fault for letting him live. But when Gregor said back at the end of Book 2 that no one would follow Rip Red if he killed the Bane, he was right. Gregor wonders about Rip Red's grand plan, because when they first met in Book 1, Rip Red wanted to overthrow King Gorger, but now that Gorger is dead, Gregor doesn't know what the goal is.
And I also hadn't thought about that until now. It's like, he wants peace, but like, what's he willing to do to make that happen?
Right, what's his method of bringing about peace?
It's so interesting that Rip Red does not have like a super specific goal, but that he's still such a compelling character.
Right? I think that it's because he does have a very specific motive.
That's true.
We are kept in the dark about that.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
He has a driving force, but Gregor and us, the readers, are not completely aware of that, or like, we don't completely understand it, and we don't need to, because Rip Red has this like air of mystery around him.
Yes.
When asked, Rip Red admits that he doesn't really want to be king himself, but he does want peace between the species, and he doesn't think Pearl Pelt is on board with that plan. Rip Red thought he could teach the Bane to be, quote, something other than what he was fated to be, but he got to him too late. His father's snare already did too much damage.
And this is the part I was waiting to talk about, because it's so interesting that Rip Red, especially as somebody who is later revealed to like think that the prophecies are fake, right? He basically, like, he doesn't think the Bane was fated to be bad from birth, but he does think that it was basically immediately too late for him.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting that, like, because I'm like, I feel like it wasn't. He's like, yeah, he saw too many bad things happen to him as a kid. It's already too late. And then the fact that he later volunteers to raise this kid, but already thinks that it's like too late for him to be a good, like, not a terrible person is like, damn, dude.
Yeah. I'm wondering if it's less like fate as in the prophecies and more of fate as in like how we keep talking about like doomed from the beginning. And how all of these different characters, like, I think actually the Bane and Ares have a lot in common in that they are both forced to fulfill these roles, and they die as a result of it, and they were kind of fated to die from the beginning because of all of the circumstances in the Underland, and like everything that Henry or the Bane's parents did to set them up for failure.
Right. And I was thinking, like, even though the Bane isn't doomed, like, the prophecy isn't necessarily true, but he's still doomed because of this prophecy, because everybody they treat him like the rats treat him like they're going to be, like he's going to be their future ruler, and the humans treat him like he's going to be their future death sentence.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if the prophecies are real. It matters that everyone thinks they're real.
Yeah.
And that is influencing the Bane's life and choices. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
Because of that.
And I wonder if that's part of the reason why Rip Red is able to be like, no, these prophecies are stupid, because he can so clearly see, like, what's happening here.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. That is really interesting. I hadn't thought about, like, bringing in the fact that Rip Red doesn't believe in the prophecies, but I think that makes sense. Like, Rip Red can see all of the different threads and, like, why things have turned out the way that they have in the Underland.
Really uniquely, because he's a rat, he has a rat perspective, and he talks to the humans and, like, presumably to other species.
Yeah, and he's been around a while.
Right.
Yeah. Gregor remembers Snare and Goldshard fighting in the labyrinth in Book 2, but he hadn't known Snare was Pearlpelt's father. Rip Red says, Snare was a vile creature by anyone's account. Why Goldshard ever agreed to be his mate is a mystery. I warned her against it. She didn't listen, but she regretted it. And I think that this might be the reason that some people have theorized that Rip Red and Goldshard were siblings.
Yeah, because why else would he have had this much, like, personal influence over who she's going to mate with, not knowing that she's going to be the Bane's mother?
Right. And I always thought that Rip Red was just, like, friends with her before she got with Snare. But I actually really like the theory that Rip Red and Goldshard were related.
Right. Because it's like, damn, that's kind of a nosy... I guess if you're a close friend, you can say that. But, like, dang.
Right.
Getting all up in her business.
Right. Yeah. And, like, offering advice and being like, that guy isn't right for you.
Yeah.
Like, that seems like a brotherly thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rip Red reveals that Snare killed all the other pups in Pearlpelt's litter, so he wouldn't have to compete for milk. And Pearlpelt remembers that. He also remembers that Snare beat him and that his parents killed each other. Rip Red says Pearlpelt still trembles at the mention of Snare's name. He goes on to say that Pearlpelt probably could end up being king because he's the Bane, and his followers will overlook how unbalanced he is as long as he promises them revenge against the humans for the starvation and plague. Gregor wonders if things would have turned out different if Goldshard had lived, and Rip Red says they'll never know. But Razor did take good care of Pearlpelt, and, quote, whatever conclusions you may draw from today's little drama, I was not unkind to him as a pup. Which I'm not entirely sure I believe.
Yeah, not the most reliable narrator in this moment.
Yeah. I really want to believe that Rip Red was, like, trying to be a good dad at first, but I also have a really hard time believing it. And I always have. Like, I've never really fully believed Rip Red when he said this.
Uh-huh.
Even when I read this book as a kid, I was like, that doesn't sound right.
Like, I would believe that he thought he was being a good dad, but...
Yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to hear what other people have to say about this.
Yeah.
And, like, this whole question of, like, did Rip Red further doom the Bane by being so mean to him?
I feel like yes.
But, like, to what extent is, like, a discussion that we could have, like, over and over again?
Yes. Yeah, could Rip Red have stopped the Bane from becoming the Bane if he had been nicer? Like, would that have changed anything?
Yeah. And I think that I would really love to hear people's thoughts about that in the comments or in our Tumblr asks or whatever. Gregor sees that Rip Red looks miserable, so he gives him Mrs. Cormacy's macaroni salad. After Rip Red eats both the salad and the bag, he ends the chapter by laying a paw on Gregor's shoulder and saying, "We have to kill him, warrior, and the sooner the better." Which is just so dramatic.
Yeah, damn. I love that Rip Red, like, how long has he been thinking this for while still living with the Bane?
Right.
And he's just like, the Bane comes in and he's like, all right, he can let Gregor see what he's all about. He tells Gregor some stuff about him. And then he just asks, what do you think? Which is so, he's just like, I just am wondering.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting how Rip Red is, like, manipulating this scene.
That's true.
Like, he is getting the Bane to attack him, kind of. Like, he's egging him on.
I'm like, yeah, I assumed he did that every time, but this time he's like, no, I want Gregor to see that he's actually can be dangerous.
Right. And it's clear that, like, the Bane has attacked Rip Red before, so I think it's interesting that Rip Red is like, I want Gregor to see that he does this.
Right. Rip Red could have been just like, I know you'll attack me, fuck off. But he was like, no, do it.
Yeah, like I think Rip Red is like purposefully poking the Bane, like trying to provoke him and show off how unbalanced he is.
Yeah, and the fact that he brought him along at all, like we don't know exactly how recently he's become the Bane's caretaker, but it seems like it's been a little bit because they clearly have a history. And he said he told the Bane to stay back, but he had the Bane like wait within smelling distance.
Right.
Knowing that Gregor brings food.
Ooh.
How deep does this go?
I was about to say that. Yeah, has Rip Red orchestrated this?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think to some extent Rip Red is definitely manipulating the way that Gregor is viewing the Bane by showing him the worst of the Bane and like purposefully putting the Bane in a bad mood and making him violent and then cry and then
Right.
Yeah.
And then he's like, so what did you think?
Yeah, exactly. He's like, so what did you think of the unhinged rat that I have made purposefully more unhinged in front of you to show off how unhinged he is?
Right. Do you think we should kill him maybe? I feel like that could be a good idea.
Yeah, like clearly that's the only way to deal with this issue.
This is so interesting because I feel like this is the first time that Rip Red is directly like, we need to kill somebody. Like, usually he's all about preventing unnecessary death. And it's so surprising to see him say we need to kill him. It makes you think like, one, oh shit's getting real, and two, holy fuck, Rip Red, dude, what?
Yeah, it's pretty extreme. Yeah, great opener to this book.
Yeah.
Just absolutely amazing first 2 chapters.
Yeah. And so many themes, like all this stuff about the Bane. I'm just like, I'm really like, I want to believe that things could have been better. Like, I hate the narrative in general, like in Criminal Minds, they're like, yeah, this kid has a rough childhood, so now we know he's going to be a serial killer. We know because he wet the bed and he did this and he did that. And it's like, but probably we still could have improved things before like the killing started. So it's interesting for me to see this in like children's book form and to get little kids to think like, is somebody really bad just because of how they're born? Like, what's happening to affect
Or
that?
like if they have a bad childhood that they'll end up like this. But I think that in this, it's a little more nuanced. Like, Gregor thinks a lot about the Bane throughout this book and the next one.
Right.
And he considers all these different angles of, like, yeah, he had a terrible dad, and he had to be raised by a Rip Red, and all of this other, like, all these other difficulties. Like, I think that the world that the Bane lives in has set him up to become a monster, but I don't think that that necessarily means that he was always going to become.
I see what you're saying. And Gregor is someone with outside perspective of this world, thinks about it, and has to think about it a lot, because really when Rip Red says, let's kill him, he's saying that, like, Gregor needs to kill him.
Yeah.
Because, first of all, just because Gregor is also destined to, and second of all, because Rip Red still really can't kill the Bane.
Right.
Even though he's not a baby. Like, still a bad move politically.
Yeah, I think Rip Red is trying to recruit Gregor because earlier in this chapter he was saying, like, you were right, like, if I kill the Bane, the rats won't follow me. And I think that he's recruiting Gregor to be, like, the face of the operation.
Yeah.
Because if Gregor kills the Bane, then that's fine. The warrior was always supposed to kill the Bane.
Right. It's kind of similar to how Katniss becomes the symbol of the revolution in the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, you're the right person to do this.
Yeah.
So you have to be our sword arm here.
Mm-hmm. But we're gonna really call the shots from behind the scenes.
Right. And it's so fun that Rip Red is doing that, but saying we need to kill him.
Yeah.
Knowing full well who's gonna be killing him.
Right. And Rip Red knows that Gregor won't want to kill him.
Right,
Like,
true.
he's doing all of this manipulation and, like, trying to convince Gregor that, like, he needs to kill him because he knows that Gregor won't want to.
Right. Yeah. He needs to get all this set up because last time Gregor had to kill the Bane, he didn't.
Yeah. So much going on.
Yeah.
So much being set up for the rest of these books.
Literally. It's so good.
So good.
What did she put in them to make them so
The
good?
secret sauce. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining me, Nate.
Yeah, it was good to be back.
Yeah, it is good to be back. Next week's episode will cover chapters 3 and 4. Find us on Tumblr, Instagram, and YouTube at Return to Regalia, all one word. And before we wrap up, Nate and I just wanted to let y'all know that we started another book podcast.
Oh, yeah, Una especially, we're addicted.
I just can't keep myself from making podcasts, apparently.
Yeah. You're like, oh, good, time for a break from my podcast. What am I going to do with my spare time?
Make another podcast, literally. Yeah, so it's called the Foxhole Cast, and it's a reread podcast like this one, where we go through a book series chapter by chapter, but it's about the All for the Game series by Nora Sakavic, which is absolutely nothing like the Underland Chronicles.
Yeah, good move to say. Not only in terms of violence are they really similar.
Yeah, honestly, actually, they are. I mean, if you're into the Gregor fandom for the violence, then maybe you will like the Foxhole Court, the All for the Game series.
Foxhole Court is like Gregor, but if every character was some version of Rip Red.
Yeah, actually, a little bit.
Oops. Oops, all Rip Red.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Anyway, if you have read the All for the Game series, you might enjoy hearing Nate and I talk about it. If you haven't read the books,
don't.
Yeah, don't. But maybe you would find Nate and I talking about it interesting anyway, because we do have some people listening who have said that they've never read the books before. So you could join them in their confusion.
The land of confusion.
Stay tuned after we sign off to hear a 5-minute supercut of the Foxhole Cast's spoiler-free intro episode.
Yes.
Until next time, thanks for listening, and fly you high.
Fly you high.
Hello, and welcome to the Foxhole Cast. I'm Una.
And I'm Nate.
And today we are here to tell you about a very special book series. That series is, of course, All for the Game by Nora Sakavic. I was gonna challenge you to try and explain the plot in 30 seconds.
Ooh, okay.
Go.
So basically, it's like if you got sold to One Direction, but One Direction is a sports team that only recruits bad people, and the people selling you isn't your mom, it's a gang that has your mom in it, but they killed your mom. And so now you need to go to this school and train so you can play Exy. But then there's this dude who's in love with you, but he also likes violence.
4, 3.
Oh, 2, shit. Oh, is that it? 1. That's all the important parts.
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. Yeah, it's about this guy named Neil. He's 18 and he is on the run from his father, he's like a mob boss.
Yeah.
So Neil is on the run. Recently his mom died, but they were on the run together for a while. But now Neil is all on his own, and all he has left in his life to bring him joy is Exy. A sport that the author made up. It's kind of like indoor lacrosse. Basically, the plot is that Neil, even though he's trying to hide his identity and be on the run, he goes to play Exy for this college team of misfits.
Yes.
And there he finds out that there's more mafia stuff going on than he thought. And there's a lot of mysterious characters that he comes into contact with, and he kind of gets all wrapped up in their drama.
Which is also his own drama from the past coming back to haunt him. It's like if the thing you wrote in middle school when you had no filter or boundaries, but that made you feel so safe and warm, was published as a book.
It's like if you wrote a mobster AU of a sports anime.
Yeah.
So pretend that there's a sports anime and it's completely normal, and write a fan fiction about it where you give everyone the craziest, most violent, traumatic backstories, and then you put them together, but you still have this found family thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason that even the fans of this series don't recommend the books to other people.
Yeah, although you did.
I do. because I enjoy inflicting book series on my friends, but I also like warn them it's very graphic and violent, and it's not good. Like, the first book is not good.
Yeah.
I guess when you think of the All for the Game series, what do you love about it and what do you hate about it?
I mean, love the homoerotic violence. I think the plot is actually, it didn't make any goddamn sense to me last time, like the ending, but now I'm like, oh, I see like how she's setting things up and how all these things are interweaving. I like that.
I really love just how weird the characters are. The characters behave in ways that no real human being would ever behave. But if you're just with it, it's like funny, and there's this found family aspect, and a lot of it is about characters overcoming trauma, and there's a lot of queer representation, which is very unique.
More queer dirtbag representation.
Yeah, for real.
It's here. You might not like it, but this is what peak performance looks like.
Yeah, but like to get to that like beautiful found family overcoming trauma queer rep part, you have to wade through the actual trauma of all of these characters, and it's very graphic. There's parts that are very like homophobic and racist and sexist. So you do have to put up with a lot of shit to get to the good stuff. But yeah, I mean, that is the question though. Are these books good or are they bad?
That really is the question.
And that is what we're trying to figure out on this podcast. Like, what makes the Foxhole Court so unique? Why do people like it? Why do people hate it? Why does it work or not work? We aren't the biggest, most dedicated fans of the series, but we are perplexed and fascinated by this series. And I think that this podcast is just our way of trying to figure out why we're so fascinated by it.
Right.
So yeah, humble listener, what do you think? Is the All for the Game series good, bad, complicated? Let us know your thoughts at thefoxholecasters@gmail.com or on social media. We're on Tumblr, Instagram, and YouTube at The Foxhole Cast, all one word. You can find all of these links and more at thefoxholecast.card.co. Until next time, thanks for listening.
You were amazing.